Khaled Sak, a non-resident senior fellow in the Atlantic Council in the African Hariri Center, and I'm glad to be joined today by Her Excellency Rania Al-Mashat, one of the most senior members of the Egyptian cabinet. Welcome, Dr. Rania.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled.
You have a very important and broad portfolio that includes economic planning and development as well as international cooperation. This is in addition to your past senior positions as Minister of Tourism and at the IMF and the Central Bank of Egypt. So you are the best qualified person to brief us today, update us on the economic situation in Egypt and on the impact of the ongoing tensions related to global trade and tariffs.
Well, thank you very much. You know, we're here in Washington this week where everybody is talking about the global economy. We saw updated forecasts from the different institutions on global growth. But let me focus on the Egypt story. Egypt's economy, and I want everybody to look beyond the macro numbers. You will see GDP recovering over the past 3 quarters. And when you go beyond the numbers, so I'm not going to say that we're just growing by 3.8% in the second quarter of the fiscal year. Where is this growth coming from? It's coming from the non-oil manufacturing sector. It's coming from a rebound in tourism. It's coming from activity in the ICT sector, as well as construction. And all of this is happening despite the headwinds from the Suez Canal, which has dropped significantly. So what we are seeing is a very important move from reliance on non-tradable sectors to tradable sectors. And this comes on the back of the very strong macroeconomic policies that the government had undertaken a year ago, almost to the dot, in March 2024, which restored confidence, helped us bring back an orderly foreign exchange market, very important for production and for exports. So it's an invitation for everybody when you talk about Egypt, not just look at the headline numbers, look at where growth is coming from and tie it to the very important macroeconomic policies that the government has undertaken. And we are complementing them with structural reforms to push sustainably the macroeconomic stability that we spend so much time, if we can say it was hard won in some sense.
Minister, you mentioned construction. Egypt has implemented several mega projects over the past few years. Can you share with us your vision on the role of public investment in generating growth? And can you elaborate on how it can be sequenced and prioritized to ensure the highest impact, including to help alleviate poverty and to improve income equality?
So I'm sure that everybody who was here in Washington, yesterday there was the Development Committee of the World Bank. Today we had the IMFC here at the IMF. And a few things, a few concepts came up very vividly. Most importantly, growth and jobs. These are 2 words that if you take a look at the number of times they've been repeated over the past 4 days, they probably come at the top. And they come at the top both from the IMF and the World Bank. And the World Bank put out 5 priority sectors for countries. They are not mutually exclusive and they depend on different circumstances. But one of the key sectors for growth and jobs is the infrastructure sector. And the infrastructure is important because it opens up pathways for private sector engagement. If we're talking about ports, if we're talking about roads, if we're talking about bridges, if we're talking about digital infrastructure, all of these are very important foundations for private sector to be able to do their job. So one of the recommendations from international institutions is that as countries today are trying to focus on medium-term growth, which is much needed to mitigate the implications of what we're seeing in terms of trade tensions and slowdown globally, is the infrastructure sector. Egypt spent several years building foundations for private sector-led growth, and spending on infrastructure projects was a priority at that moment in time. Today, and I repeat this again, we are putting a narrative around our economic growth, one that shifts us from a reliance on non-tradables to tradables. So infrastructure is a non-tradable sector. It's a sector which is necessary to be able to push private sector engagement, to push employment to some extent, but it's not it's not sufficient. What is sufficient is private sector engagement, a more competitive economy, an economy that depends on manufacturing, exports, and exports of services and so forth. So we are at that inflection point. It's showing up in our data most recently, and it's something that we are pushing towards. You linked it to public investments. A cornerstone of Egypt's macroeconomic stability program is a retrenchment in public investments. And this is where the story is consistent. We're retrenching public investments, allowing more private sector engagement with a realization that the spending that was done on the infrastructure was necessary to be able to go to the second phase, which is inviting this FDI and inviting more private sector engagement, but it has to be coupled with the structural reforms that create a competitive and investment-friendly economy.
Yeah, but when you talk about divestment of state-owned assets, how do you strike the right balances? It is one of the areas of reform that the IMF is criticizing as lagging. However, I understand there are very difficult balances to strike, including you have to strike balances between speed, due diligence, and buy-in by the public opinion. So how do you strike these balances, and what do you think the right speed is?
So divestiture includes more than one aspect. You can actually IPO a company, you can privatize a company, you can dismantle an SOE, you can restructure an SOE. So there are different ways and different modalities to actually push a divestment program. In our case, and in June of 2023, we signed an agreement with the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, part of the private sector arm of the World Bank, to be our strategic partner in putting a plan on key sectors that would be available for divestiture. And just last month, we signed the first sector, one of the most important sectors for Egypt, which is aviation. As you know, tourism in Egypt represents 15% of GDP. We are seeing a rebound in tourist arrivals as well as in revenues. So it's a very attractive sector for private sector engagement. We signed with the IFC an agreement to open up for foreign or private companies to operate the airports, add equity to modernize them. And this is going to be a game changer, both for the sector, but also the concept that certain public services can be open for private engagement. So that's one example. Another example is a few state-owned enterprises which have also been provided in terms of their financials to investment banks to take a look at and provide advice on whether to privatize, IPO, or how much, what's the percent, what's the valuation. So it's very important, it's a responsibility for governments to ensure that the valuations are ones which are unbiased, which are done by independent bodies, ones that actually create not just I would say agreeability with the international community, but also with the public constituency. So that's the important fine line that we're taking. In the past, with markets being very volatile, it was sometimes perceived that if you are going to do a certain asset sale, it might be a fire sale, which is not necessarily a good time. And we have to remember that part of this divestiture program is to actually add more returns and revenues to the fiscal side. So unless the asset is also going to have, and that's why the evaluation becomes very important, so that you are able to then make sure that the benefit of moving out is also going to be reflected in more than one dimension. Of course, a more competitive economy, a level playing field, but also that the returns for the budget, particularly that we have a very strong and I would say significant fiscal program where we're trying to bring down and we have been successfully bringing down the debt numbers in percent of GDP.
Yeah. So moving to the fiscal challenges, you indeed mentioned the debt. It's an issue. Part of that was due to the sizable public borrowing to finance the mega projects, which, as you mentioned, are important to bring in private sector, to crowd it in. However, debt has become large. So what are you doing to control public borrowing? And what do you do to enhance the public debt management? I know this is something that is a matter of focus for you and the Ministry of Finance.
So let me just go back a little bit to 2020 when COVID happened. Because part of mitigating the implications of COVID on different economies, and this is not Egypt specific, this is more global beyond regions, was to ensure that there's some fiscal stimulus to mitigate the downturn from the slowdown that was witnessed globally. And part of the restoration of macroeconomic stability, as I mentioned, is both fiscal retrenchment, and at the same time there was a monetary tightening. Both of these levers, in addition to the ceilings that we put on public investment, were the trio that helped us bring down inflation rates, bring down fiscal deficit in percent of GDP. Primary surplus today, when you look at Egypt's primary surplus, it's over 3%, which is a very strong and robust development. And again, I repeat, despite the headwinds that Egypt's economy is facing from the geopolitical situation in the region and from the very significant downturn that we've seen in the Suez Canal receipts, which again is not our doing, but it's an external shock that we had to deal with. So having ceilings on public investment, not engaging in new projects, meant by virtue that also external borrowing to fill in these gaps is not taking place. And so those two elements have been key in making sure that our debt is sustainable. And it's very important to mention that Egypt has an IMF program, and we have successfully finished 4 reviews of the program. And a cornerstone in any IMF program, and Dr. Khalid, you worked at the fund for many years, so have I, debt sustainability analysis are a cornerstone of IMF programs. So all of these elements, again, push in the direction of macroeconomic stability. We are committed to ensure that macroeconomic stability that has been achieved is maintained and continues.
Yeah, I'm glad you are enhancing your in-house capacity also to do the debt analysis and to better manage public debt. I understand you are working closely with the Ministry of Finance on that. So you mentioned the global trends, and indeed the recent fiscal monitor by the IMF has cautioned that global public debt is growing towards 100% of global GDP. In the next year is going to hit that. In many countries, it's already above 100% of GDP. So Egypt is, in fact, despite the challenges we spoke about, seems to be in a relatively good position within this outlook. Your public debt is now rapidly declining. So it was already at 96% of GDP. Now it's about 83% just in 2 years. And the projection is that it will go to almost 60% of GDP over the medium term in a few years. So maybe that is necessary to create more space for other expenditures, but it requires a large positive primary surplus, as you mentioned. This leaves less space for health, education, and social protection. Do you think the speed of adjustment is too high? And how are you striking these balances, and how are you managing the downside impact on growth and on social expenditure?
So let me maybe split your question into different parts. The first part is as we are retrenching public investment, and coming down on our external borrowing because we're not engaging in new government projects, take a look at GDP numbers. You will see that on the expenditure side of GDP, private investments are growing. Another important aspect of the Egyptian economy, and this is linked to the international cooperation part of the job, is we enjoy very robust and strong partnerships with different IFIs and multilateral development banks that lend to the private sector. So in 2024, this was the first year that concessional finance to the private sector exceeded the government. So with $4.5 billion of concessional finance to the private sector, you are able to attract FDI, you are able to push the frontiers of the economy in key sectors, and you are able to create jobs which are necessary to mitigate some of the impact that you talked about when you say you are bringing down the fiscal deficit and you're trying to bring down the debt level. So that's one aspect, that as you are doing this on the public side, you are also doing a lot of structural reforms in terms of easing business, streamlining the procedures, trying to make the economy more competitive, licensing, trade barriers, non-tariff barriers. We have a national program for structural reforms. This program includes policies related to macro-fiscal stability, related to competitiveness and increasing private sector engagement, and the green transition. And Egypt has a very significant renewable sector which attracts private investment. So that is one element that is very important for everybody to realize. And when I say go beyond the headline numbers, these are all important pointers that add to the narrative. We're putting together an important document that will come out in June. It's called Advancing Economic Development in Egypt, Reforms for Growth, Jobs and Resilience. So these elements are in there so that people can see the sectors which are drivers of private investment, sectors which are drivers of industrial development, and how labor and skills are linked to all of this. Then comes your other point about social protection, health, and education, despite the tighter fiscal space that exists. And I would refer everybody to the budget this year. We were just in the parliament last week discussing the budget for 25-26, the next fiscal year. And you will see in the budget a very concise, human-centric part of the budget, which is increased spending on health, education, and a wider net for the social protection program, Takaful and Karama. So there has been a targeted focus on making sure that as we are tightening, we are allowing more private sector engagement to increase growth and the potential of the economy, and at the same time, make sure that within the tighter budget we have, there are targeted programs that address exactly health, education, or the social spending. If I take a look at the public investment, which we are responsible for in planning economic development and international cooperation, 45% of public investments go to social or human capital sectors. And this is by design. So last year, that number was less. It was close to 40%. So here we are also, in terms of public investment, putting more into the human capital, which includes the social sectors that you mentioned.
How are you managing this with the large number of refugees? So Egypt is already hosting about 10 million refugees, and this is an admirable humanitarian act, which of course comes with a substantial fiscal burden. So how are you dealing with this?
So first, I mean, our president is extremely clear that Egypt, when we talk about refugees, we are talking about visitors. They live in Egypt in an integrated way. But as you mentioned, this is an additional fiscal, it has fiscal consequences. And, you know, we deal with it in the sense that it adds additional fiscal pressure and requires that more has to be done. There's no compensation one-to-one, and this is something that is clear. There has not been from the different institutions globally a way to compensate for that cost. And therefore, it actually is, as you mentioned, additional pressure on the budget. And when we are putting our fiscal targets, our macroeconomic framework, this is also an angle which again pushes a lot of puts additional cost on the government.
Other ways to raise revenue and address the debt would be improving the tax collection performance, not necessarily the rates themselves, and also mobilizing more support regionally. If you can tell us a little bit about that, and also about the recent news about the possible conversion of the Kuwaiti and Qatari deposits at the central bank to investments in the country, following the last year's Ras Al-Hikma's initiative with the UAE.
So let me go to your first part of the question. And if you take a look at the results, at the outturn of the first 9 months of the fiscal year, you will see that without tax increases, the revenues have gone up. And this is because the Ministry of Finance has taken a new approach, an approach of increased confidence between the authorities and the public. And there have been increased efficiencies when it comes to the structural issues related to tax collection. So we are seeing exactly what you're saying in terms of an increase, a 45% increase in tax revenues just because of improved efficiencies. So that took place and it's continuing. And that's a good sign. And it also links to the structural reforms we talked about. So in order to maintain the macroeconomic stability, you need to continue doing structural reforms so that it's sustained and it's maintained. So that's one element. The second element, Egypt had a debt swap for investment with the UAE. This took place at the end of 2023. And it provided a very important demonstration effect. A demonstration effect not just for other countries that have debt with Egypt, but a global demonstration effect. If you go to UNCTAD's report recently, you will see that they mentioned this debt swap as an example that could be replicable for other countries and the relationship between creditors and debtors. So what Ras Al-Hikma has done is created a global example for how countries can bilaterally negotiate a debt swap, but at the same time, how countries can provide sectoral interest that is mutual and has benefits that are reciprocated. And this is something that other countries might follow suit as well.
And are you confident about the domestic linkages with the rest of the economy for such operations?
So if I go back to what I started with, and that's what the World Bank talks about when they say growth and jobs, there have been 5 sectors that have been identified as those that provide countries with the possibility of more growth and jobs. Infrastructure, energy, tourism, health, and manufacturing. If you take a look at 4 of these 5 sectors, you will see that they are related to Ras Al-Hikma. Ras Al-Hikma is in a touristic area, so travel and tourism is there. The infrastructure that is needed is going to be in the country. The material that is going to be used in the construction is going to be domestic. And when you take a look at the manufacturing, many of this infrastructure is going to be manufactured in the country. So there are these linkages that are not, and it's going to create a destination which is on Egyptian land. So if I take what has just been, and you know that I try to always demonstrate what Egypt is doing with the international angle, I can take everything that was mentioned earlier this week in Washington and say that that's exactly what's happening, and we will be fulfilling this so that we can provide to the international community the example of how it can happen.
Any updates on Kuwait and Qatar that you can share with us?
As I mentioned, what happened in Ras Al Hikma is a good demonstration effect for other countries.
Okay. So we are running out of time, but Minister, you get the last word. In addition to what you've mentioned, which is relevant to other countries, what are other lessons that developing and emerging economies can learn from Egypt's experience, both on avoiding risks and to reap opportunities?
So we are very committed to macroeconomic stability, but that's only necessary. What makes it sufficient are the structural reforms. So those two elements are, we tie them very closely. I would advise, we put now a lot of material to basically avail information more systematically so that people can go beyond the numbers to the stories. Egypt also has done debt swaps for development with some of our bilateral partners. So this is another example which is important. And then finally, we're putting together the report on advancing economic development in Egypt, growth, jobs, and resilience. And this is again going to show all the structural reforms we are putting in place to create a competitive, investment-friendly economy, moving from the non-tradable sectors to the tradable sectors.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for this insightful discussion. It's always a pleasure to have you in Washington. To our audience, also thank you for having joined us. And I would like to announce that at 2 p.m. there is another session on the road to Seville. So I hope you will be joining us then. Thank you.